Hello, San Francisco, and welcome once again to the Angelic Troublemakers. I'm your host, Alan Jones, and on today's program, idiots and fools and slaves, oh my. Idiots, fools, and slaves, oh my. Let me try that again. Idiots and fools and slaves, oh my. I am remembering The Wizard of Oz, which brings me to today's program. And the term lions, tigers, and bears, oh my, lions, tigers, and bears, oh my, that was a song or chant that Dorothy of The Wizard of Oz and her three cohorts, the Cowardly Lion, the Tin Man, and the Scarecrow, chanted when they were faced with the going into the jungle to, head off to the Wizard of Oz. And so the fear hit them. And they started off this chant with Dorothy saying, lions and tigers and bears, oh my. Lions and tigers and bears, oh my. And then they all got in there to basically, sing their fears of what they might run into in the wilderness. Well, idiots and fools and slaves, oh my. Idiots and fools and slaves, oh my, brings me to a pet peeve that I have against black folks. Yes, I'm criticizing black people. Now, I am going to be reading something that I wrote, and it's going to take a while. It's going to probably take up this whole program, and it is based on a couple of weeks ago where there was a hearing at San Francisco City Hall. And I wrote this article because I was asked to. But the person who asked me to write it then decided not to use it. And I believe that the reason why they decided not to use it was justifiable, because I'm no writer, no journalist. I barely know a noun from a verb. The fact of me writing, I write basically, I'm an unconventional writer. I write my passions. And sometimes, because I don't know how to structure paragraphs and sentences, things get messed up. Don't get me wrong, I've written some stuff that people have praised, but I do not claim to be a writer. But I observed this hearing, and I wrote my observations. And that's what I'm going to read, and I'm going to point out where I think that the black workers of San Francisco are idiots and fools and slaves, oh my. So let me go to my Medium account, which is on the screen here, and I'm going to read this that I wrote, and it's titled, San Francisco City Hall calls on its racism expert, Department of Human Resources Director Mickey Callahan, to further oppress black city workers. I'm going to read the first 3 paragraphs, and then I'm going to break in, and then I'm going to read some more. San Francisco Mayor London Breed and the Board of Supervisors are calling on Department of Human Resources Director Mickey Callahan to fix the problems of racism and bullying of black city workers. This is a blatant disregard or slap in the face to all blacks when one learned in a September 2018 committee hearing Ms. Callahan has covered up or covered for many city department heads most responsible for these acts of racism and bullying. A hearing took place on November 27, 2018, titled African American Workforce Hiring, Retention, and Promotional Opportunities for Black Workplace Discrimination and Complaints at City Hall Board Chambers, a follow-up to a September committee hearing. Now, I must say that I'm going to try and do something that I don't know. Well, I'm going to just scroll. This is the San Francisco Human Resource Director, Mickey Callahan. And she is being called on to fix the problems that her agency has caused in city employment. Reading further, in a repeat performance of a September 19, 2018 board committee hearing on the same subject, Ms. Callahan began her presentation by highlighting the fact that San Francisco is above the national average for the hiring of Black workers. Continuing, she seemed proud to state the city employs 15% Blacks compared to the national average of about 4.6% Black government workers. A clear deflection from the real issue, which is racism and bullying of the 15% Black city workers. She also displayed a chart showing that San Francisco has 47% white population, but only 30% are employed in city government. Anyone truly committed to addressing the real reason for this hearing would not have used these numbers as she did. Let me go on here. A more appropriate use of those figures would have been to determine what percentage of the 15% Black workers are treated unfairly versus what percentage of the 30% of white workers are being treated unfairly in city employment. The answer, I'm sure, is much uglier than what she is trying to put over here. Now, I can tell you, people, that in reading this, and I'll go back to it, we are faced with a situation that San Francisco city workers at SEIU 1021 who've pushed for this meeting, this hearing, concerning their treatment and the treatment of lots of Black city workers, is really troubling when you hear some of the things that I heard. The presenters from the city were saying one thing, and those who were pushing for this meeting from SEIU 1021 were praising the Board of Supervisors for hearing their grievances. But they were doing so with a fool's type mentality. I have said on this program many times before, I don't like to be played a fool. And sure, this issue does not involve me. The fact that I'm Black and it was a Black city workers issue, well, I understand that they may have their style buttering up, kissing up, or whatever it is, to get their point across. I get it. It works for some, I guess. It does not work for me. Especially when you consider the fact that this group, SEIU 10-1, stood on the steps of San Francisco City Hall chanting on November 27th, "No justice, no peace." And they kept repeating it. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. Well, then you get into the hearing, and there was no justice, but lots of peace. And I don't get it. Why are you going to chant out on the steps of City Hall, one thing, but when you go in, you act like idiots, fools, and slaves? Oh my. It's really hard to understand. It really is. But let me go back to this article that I wrote and point out other issues here. When any city worker is first hired, they are placed on probation. After a certain period, they either become permanent or they are terminated. Probation dismissals are not appealable unless for discrimination, which is hard to prove. But this is what Mickey Callahan told the board hearing. But later in testimony, we learned from Joseph Bryant, SEIU 10-1, over 200 probation dismissals for blacks versus just 3 dismissals for whites in city employment in the time frame these latest figures reveal. Now, how could that be? 200 probation dismissals for blacks and only 3 for whites? Though Ms. Callahan admitted her agency has problems, she failed to show even a half thimble size of respect to the city's black workforce by simply beginning her presentation by apologizing to the board for the failures of her department in the 15 minutes she spoke to the 11-member legislative body of San Francisco. Reading on, 4 of the city's largest departments presented a snapshot of how they are handling issues concerning their black workers at this hearing. Skipping, all department heads tossed around the term implicit bias training as if it was a frisbee. Now let me stop there. I am no fan of implicit bias training. Why? Number one, you would assume that none of these people had mothers. Mothers all over the world have taught us how we should treat one another. And to say that there's implicit bias training, we all have biases. And the fact that we all have biases to try and give racists a pass by saying, well, maybe they just didn't know. Well, I know that there's some biases that I have that I don't know of or just not aware of. I don't need training for that. All I need is just to remember how to treat people. Now, I will say that I was not raised by my mother. I was raised by my father. And quite frankly, my father taught me to love. And he did so based on how he treated people, and I witnessed him over the years, how he treated people. And that's where I learned. But I'm saying that everybody who jumps on this implicit bias training, we should just realize that there's some people, if you have to, at an adult level, need training on your biases, the only training you need is to be fired, in my opinion. Because if you don't know how to treat people when you're an adult, then I think that we need somebody else. And let me tell you something. When I read to you that there were 200 probation dismissals for blacks versus 3 for whites, well, it seems as though there is no problem in firing people who don't meet the standards. But apparently, we're going to offer implicit bias training. And some of the people who are implementing it are from the San Francisco Human Rights Commission. And I have been on that commission as an advisory, committee advisor. And I'm going to tell you something. The people who are training city workers on implicit bias, they themselves need to be fired. And it's because if you're going to believe in implicit bias training, the people who are worst offenders are in the San Francisco Human Rights Commission. But let me go back to this article and try and get some more out of here. I'm going to move down to see this little chart here. This is the evidence I have of a settlement. If you follow my little pointer here, right there, that's Mickey Callahan's signature. Not only was she the person at the Department of Human Resources to sign off on this, she was a defendant. And what this was this individual, his name is Thomas Willis, sued the city of San Francisco, the former director of the Human Rights Commission, and Mickey Callahan, because he proved that they discriminated against him simply because he was a black heterosexual male. That's it. And they settled the issue for $210,000, and he's still employed with the city somewhere else. But this is one of many lawsuits, race-based, where you will see Mickey Callahan's signature. But when SEIU asks for even close figures, they are nowhere to be found. Why? She refuses to put this information before them because it'll tell an uglier story. But let me go down here to some of the testimony from members of the Board of Supervisors. I'm going to pick out 2 of them from this article. It's Supervisor Hillary Ronan. She stated she had not viewed the September 19th committee hearing on this same matter in preparation for the November 27, 2018 hearing. But in the June 2018 SEIU 1021 rally for black city workers on the steps of City Hall, she pledged to help the black city workers of her former union. She used to be with this union, and she was bragging about how she was going to help them. But she refused to even watch the committee hearing where all the real dirt came out. She's that busy. Now, here's another issue. Supervisor Valley Brown, she hit on something that was really good. She took issue with the use of the 15% black city workforce. She viewed it as disrespectful and just not right. After forcing out of the city 55% of its black residents, she was not in the mood to celebrate a city for hiring blacks above the national average. And when one considers how badly most of the 15% black city workforce are being treated, she saw it as insulting to the intelligence of the board to use this misleading figure. And I couldn't agree with her more. But then we're going to go down to the testimony from the public. The public comment section began with the Reverend Amos Brown of Third Baptist Church encouraging the board, do not, well, and I quote, do not let courage skip your generation and do the right thing, is what he says. This picture I took of the board chanting outside SEIU, I think in September. But Joseph Bryant, a member of SEIU 1021, asked this question: when do blacks in San Francisco become a priority? Other communities here have been and continue to be a priority, including a San Francisco Board of Supervisors ordinance that bans city-funded travel and contracting with 9 states in America due to their laws that discriminate against LGBT. Now, don't you find it strange that San Francisco has the nerve enough to act like it's holier than thou when it comes to the issue of discrimination, to where they will ban city travel to 9 states in America because they have laws that are discriminating against the LGBT community. But in San Francisco, they don't have laws that ban discrimination, but they have practices that discriminate against black folks, and nobody is saying anything. I find that reprehensible, and for blacks who don't say anything, are you idiots, are you fools, or are you slaves? Oh my. Now, back to some more testimony. Felicia Jones, also from 1021, called the hearing a dog and pony show. And she's added the sheriff's department where she works had torn down a successful program she started that helped black and brown inmates. But Brenda Barrows, also a 1021, she is, I think, the chapter head at San Francisco General Hospital. And she stated, well, she kept it real. She'd been with the Department of Public Health for 34 years. And as she says, the change must begin at the top. She also said, if you aren't going to change what's going on at the top, we are all wasting our time. And I couldn't agree with her more. But she closed out by saying, we're not looking for preference, we're looking for equity. And that's absolutely right. But when you say all of these things and then you pat board members on the back claiming that they've done such a great job. Eh. Moving on. This is troubling. There is a woman by the name of Wanda Bailey. She works for the district attorney's office. She was called, and I quote, a scary nigger after she witnessed a mouse in the DA's office and was told by Mickey Callahan when she complained, one case, one complaint is not good enough to make a case. Now, how can you say something like that to the person who it was said against? Moving on to how San Francisco treats blacks. Notice this picture here. I've used this person before. In December of 2015, Dwayne Kemp, the black man, was called a nigger by a white transgender after she rudely bumped into him. A fight ensued, and the transgender was beat up. Kemp was arrested and then offered a sham of a plea deal. If you plead guilty to a felony hate crime, we will release you from jail immediately. Against the advice of his public defender, Quizam Maloff, Kemp took the deal to be home for the holiday. But at final sentencing in March of 2016, the judge said to Kemp, "You must serve time." But Kemp objected. He said, "That wasn't part of the deal that I struck with to end this case. I want to take my plea back and take this to trial." The judge refused and sent him away to jail for 9 months. This is the white establishment in San Francisco defending the transgender community even when they are in the wrong. This is reprehensible. And for blacks to turn the other cheek, when they say justice, no peace, well, where's the fallout from this? This is the most egregious part, because a man now a black man, and we know that black folks don't need any help going to jail. A black man gets a bogus felony hate crime conviction on such silliness when he was the one who was wronged by this transgender and city elected officials, meaning the DA's office. Now, of course, I end by pointing out the fact that I had this holiday hunger strike, and on day 7 of this hunger strike, I was right across the street from City Hall when this hearing began. I heard the first 30 minutes, and I called my sister. I says, "Fire up me some split pea soup." And I went over to her place, got me some split pea soup. It was delicious. And then I went and heard the rest of the testimony that I put in this article, because I knew that if I was across the street for 7 days and there was this hearing going on at the same time, black city workers really supposedly upset, And nobody knew that I was across the street is because black really don't matter. Black lives do not matter. And I'm saying that the idiots and fools and slaves are people who believe that black lives matter in San Francisco. And the black workers who are putting up with this, I need to remind you of one thing. There are 11 members of the current Board of Supervisors. One member is black, but each of them have 3 legislative aides. So you have 11 supervisors and you have 33 legislative aides. Now, do the math. Is that not 44? Out of those 44 people who are addressing, are going to have an issue to look into the issue of black city workers who are not being treated fair, guess how many out of the 44 are black? The board president. The board president, Malia Cohen. And she is termed out next month. So for people to think that something's going to change, I don't think so. The one that's getting the most praise is Sandra Fuhrer, Supervisor Sandra Fuhrer. She wants to establish a racial equity office. I think they have one in Oakland. Well, that's fine and dandy, but we already have one. It's called the San Francisco Human Rights Commission. And though it's not doing its job, I had sent something to Supervisor Sandra Fuhrer and reminded her that. And somebody from her office responded. And they said that they are looking into and they're getting assistance from the Human Rights Commission. Well, I just said that in my email to her office that the Human Rights Commission wasn't doing its job. So if you're going to them to look for guidance and I'm telling you that they're not doing their job, give me a break. That's not the way it works. Am I an idiot? Am I a fool? I'm certainly not a slave. But I'm saying that for all of this that San Francisco black workers are now putting up with in going into the new year, I'm saying you must be idiots, fools, or slaves to put up with this mess. Idiots, fools, and slaves, oh my. Idiots and fools and slaves, oh my. I'm telling you, this is not how you get justice. You are on the steps of City Hall saying no justice, no peace, but you go in there and you act like little sheep. I am not saying anything that we should go bust up stuff. The angelic troublemakers don't do that. But I'm saying you don't need to act as if these people are on your side when the evidence is clear. They are not. And if you want to really get action, you need to start by suggesting that, as Brenda Barrows suggested, the leadership at the top of the San Francisco Human Resources has got to go. That's it. Of course, now I'll throw in San Francisco owes the black community an apology, but we know that ain't gonna happen. So until next time, God bless.